Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending upon where you're joining us from around the globe. This is Robert Leake, Director of Marketing here at eFolder, and want to give you a very big welcome to today's webinar. This is part two of a two-part webinar with Andrew Bensinger walking us through really the core of what eFolder Replibit is all about. Yesterday we had a great conversation around how it came to be, some of the technology around chain-free, the way that we verify. And today, Andrew's going to walk us through a demo. Just a couple of few housekeeping items. Just as a note to everyone, this is a recorded session. And just like yesterday, we'll be sending this out to everyone who has registered for the webinar, and hopefully you'll get some points out of it. We are going to make this interactive. If you've got any questions either off the top or throughout Andrew's presentation, please just send them via the chat bar in your GoToWebinar pane, and we will, again, address those as the conversation presents itself. Andrew, at this point, I'm just going to pass it over to you and get us started.
All right, fantastic, and thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. Let me just change presenters here and passing it over to you.
Okay, and with any luck, are you looking at the Replibit login screen?
Yes, I am. So I believe everyone else on the call is as well. So again, Andrew, take it away and just send us any questions that you may have.
All right. So good news is I was able to share the right monitor. So the day's going well so far. Thanks, everyone, for taking the time to join us today. Yesterday, we spent a lot of time talking about the history of Replibit and how we got to where we are. Today, we're just going to dive in and show you the software. I try to keep these as interactive as possible. So if you have any questions throughout the demo, by all means, please chat them to Robert. Robert, feel free to stop me and read them out if there's any point. If there are some areas that I think there might be a question, I'll go ahead and ask you, Robert, if there are any questions associated with what I'm talking about. If I'm doing a good job, the answer will be no. And if I'm not, there may be a lot of questions there. Okay?
Sounds great.
All right, thank you. So the screen we are looking at is the login screen to a Replibit appliance. This is the BDR unit that goes at an end user location. Under the hood, we use the Linux kernel. We have zero expectation that you know Linux. So just about everything is done through a web browser. If you do have any issues under the hood, our support team is here to help you with that. This screen is brandable to you. All of our products are brandable. This logo can be changed to your logo. It's really easy to do, but I'm going to go ahead and log into this unit here. And when I first log in, it brings us to the protected systems screen. Now, I'm going to hop off here real quick and just show you how you can brand this. You simply go to Settings and Upload Logo, choose your JPEG file and upload it. Not only will it change on the login screen, but it will also change up here as well. Now, for nomenclature purposes, any Windows machine that we are backing up, whether it's a server or workstation, we call it a protected system screen. And as I just showed you, when you log in, it brings you to the protected system screen. Here we have some basic information about the systems we are backing up. First of all, this green dot means that this Windows 2012 server is actually running as a VM on this Replibit appliance. A gray dot means it is not virtualized. This blue dot means this machine is configured to replicate to our offsite vault in the eFolder cloud, or under our MultiVault, you could be sending it back to your location as well. And of course, the gray dot means it is not. These are the currently protected volumes being backed up. In my case, I'm only backing up C. This dynamically changes with every backup. We have found over time, as virtualization becomes more and more popular, an engineer may add a LUN to a production machine but forget to add it to the backup. So you can come in real quick and see, hey, in my most recent backup, did I get all the volumes for this particular protected system? This is a drop-down menu where you apply your schedules. You can create as many schedules as you want. It's really easy to do. On the left-hand side, you just hit the Schedules tab, and you hit Create Schedule. You give it a friendly name. I'll just call it Andy22, whether it's enabled and whether it's a default. And then you schedule your initial backup time and your incremental time. And we do things a little bit differently here to try and make life easier on you. Our agent does not require a server reboot when you install us. We talked about this yesterday. A lot of our partners will use their RMM tool to push this out midday, and you can set a specific time of when you want that initial to fire off. A lot of our partners will set it, let's say, for 7 p.m. and tell it to end by 7 a.m. before the end user gets to the office. If for some reason it doesn't finish by 7 a.m., we will pause. The end user can work all day. And then when the window opens up again at 7 p.m., we will finish out that initial backup. Once that is completed, Then we roll to the incremental schedule, and this is a 24-hour schedule on an hourly basis. You can go down as frequently as every 15 minutes, or if you have to get super granular, you can specify manual and get down to the minute of when you want backups for this particular machine to fire off. So now the next area is the details button under the actions. Here is where you will spend a lot of your life. I'm going to go ahead and click details, and it's going to take us to the details of this 2012 server. On the right-hand side is just metadata about the protected system. We give this to you simply because we have the ability to capture it, and you never know when it comes in handy. Sometimes during a disaster and a recovery, you don't know, you can't recall what the IP address of the production machine was or what size the volumes were, and you have to get very specific on volume creation or something of that sort, so we just give you that information. These are different functions within the system. I will come back to this, but a lot of people like to see the instant virtualization capability. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to our recovery points. And if you recall, on that initial protected system screen, this system had a green dot. This green dot now associates to the particular recovery point that I virtualized the system. And I'm going to go ahead, and because we're all web-based, the console to this machine is actually in a pop-up window. So I'm going to click this, and here's the pop-up window. And I'm going to go ahead and type something in so you just know it's not a static JPEG. And I'm going to go ahead and close this. It's not a big deal if you do close it. You just hit the terminal button, and the window comes back up. Now I'm going to go ahead and kill this machine and show you what's involved with doing an emergency virtualization. Okay, so customer calls, says they need your machine virtualized. You select what point in time you want to virtualize them from, and you just hit the Start VM button. You'll get this pop-up modal telling you how many resources you have available on the local BDR appliance. In this case, I'm going to leave with 2 gigs of RAM and 2 cores. We have test mode and live mode. I'll explain those in a little detail while the machine is virtualizing. We have the ability to send the F8 key. I'll get to that in a second as well as if you want to upload an ISO image or CD-ROM image to the system and boot some sort of special recovery tools, you can, and you simply hit Start. And the virtual machine will start, and as long as my pop-up blocker is not on, I should get this console popping up. Now, while this machine is booting, because we have all seen Windows boot, let me explain the difference between test mode and live mode. If you do a test mode virtualization, you can do that at any time that you want. It's the same mode we use for our boot VM check, which is the nightly virtualization check that we do. When that test mode VM is powered on, first and foremost, the virtual switch is disconnected from the production network. So it's not going to come up and register in DNS. So you can, like I said, you can do this whenever you want. And the second thing is, anytime you do a virtualization, whether it is a test mode virtualization or a live mode, we generate a spontaneous ZFS clone so we can capture the change to this VM while it's operational on the Replibit appliance. When you power off a test mode VM, we delete that clone and you're back to your original backup sets. In a live mode VM, number one, that switch is live on the network, so make sure your production machine is down or you're going to get all sorts of errors across your network. And number two, that clone becomes permanent and persistent and remains as a new clone within the backup sets. So you still have all your historical, but you're also capturing all the change occurring to this production machine for its life during its emergency virtualization. And then finally, we have the F8 key, and that's just simply so you can follow Microsoft's best practices. For example, if this were a domain controller, send F8 when you boot it, and the boot sequence will halt, enter into Active Directory restore mode, type in your credentials, and you can get your machine up and running in a proper fashion. That way you can mitigate USN rollbacks in scenarios like that. So Robert, do we have any questions about virtualization in general?
Not within the process. We did get one question come in from Jay as it relates to MultiVault and the ability to MultiVault off-site more than once, and if there's any cost associated with it.
Excellent question, and it's right in the next area I was going to go to. So this is the replication button for this particular protected system. In a little bit, I'll cover how you configure your vault settings, but if I want this unit to go off-site, I hit the replication button. We do it machine by machine, so you can be very granular, and in here is where I would configure, set up my MultiVault. If this appliance were configured to talk to 2 vaults, I could select Add Vault, select my second vault configured and what snapshot I want to act as the initial. We don't have chains, and we don't have to send everything off-site. Any point in time can act as the initial or the base image, and we'll start sending stuff after that, all the incremental data offsite. With regard to the cost associated, if you vault to yourself, there is no cost. The only offsite fees are if you buy a bundle package, which is a Replibit backup agent license and the associated 2 terabytes of offsite storage provided by eFolder for that particular system. Those 2 terabytes are aggregated into a pool. But if you want to use MultiVault, we will give you the software to build your vault absolutely free, and then you can send it to your vault at no charge from us. There's no upcharge for it. Hopefully that answers the question.
I believe it does. Thank you, Andrew.
Okay. So this is how you would set up your replication, and from the drop-down you would just select whatever particular point in time, and you can choose to use a USB-C drive if you want. This next button is our boot VM check. If I elect to turn that on, starting at 1 in the morning, this protected system will be virtualized. If you have multiple machines, we will do them sequentially with, I think it's an 8 or 10-minute separation time per VM, not to overload the resources on the system if it's a little underpowered. We will then take a snapshot of it. That snapshot is available here as viewable. We tell you what point in time we booted from, and if I click the button, there's a picture of the snapshot. We can also email this to you. If you happen to be using ConnectWise, we can put into ConnectWise as a ticket. You even have the option to put it in as a closed ticket so it doesn't flood your board because these are expected tickets coming in. And then the last thing is we can send it up to our management portal, and I'll show that to you in a few minutes. And we have our boot VM report, and on a single screen you can see all the images of all your machines and the points and times that they were virtualized. This Schedule Now button is used if you want to manually fire off a backup, and you have an option through a pop-up modal if it's an incremental or a full backup. And then Migrate. We are huge fans of bring your own device, or if you're buying hardware from us and it happens to be a unit that's not field upgradable, you can actually move this machine, this protected system, to another Replibit appliance on the network by using the Migrate button, and you have an option to do it over the LAN or via a USB drive. Now, retention. We offer 2 types of retention. Mine right now is configured for basic, and I'm saying keep every snapshot, and I basically put it for an infinite amount of time. But if I hit the change button, I can convert this to one that, if you're in a chain-based topology, will appear a little bit more similar, but it is very different from what you're actually accustomed to under the hood, because we aren't using chains and we are not duplicating data. So I can put in here, I want to retain all my snapshots for 120 days. And when I type in 120, it populates down through here. And what I'm saying is, keep everything for 120 days, every snapshot that has occurred. But if it is beyond that point in time, keep the last snapshot of the day for, let's say, 30 days, and the last snapshot of the week for 5 weeks, and month for, 24 months, and year, I can keep it for 10 years. Now, what I've just built is an exclusion list. Because we have no requirement to keep a chain all the way back to the initial backup, what I'm saying is delete anything that doesn't meet this criteria. And we can go ahead and scrub all the data in between and keep your backup sets in a manageable size while still allowing you to have a pretty sophisticated and long-running retention policy. Robert, any questions on that area?
Yeah, we've got a few things coming in around deduplication. Let's take this one. Oops, hit the wrong button. I've lost. There we go. Sorry. The question is deduplication. If we have 5x 1 terabyte similar servers, the backup space on the appliance would be 5 terabytes or less than 5 terabytes.
The space requirement on the appliance if you're backing up 5 separate machines, is that what the question is?
Yeah, I think if they've got 5 1 terabyte servers, would you need
5 terabytes on the appliance?
Yeah, or would that appliance be able to support the 5 terabytes with less than 5 terabytes on the server?
Yeah, it's actually an excellent question, and I can give you a very specific example. You could support all of those on a smaller device. We compress the heck out of the data. We offer 2 levels of compression. One is called gzip4. That usually works out to about 3 or 4% of fully deduped data. That is if your SLA does not call for instant virtualization unless you're running SSDs on your appliance. The other is LZ4 compression. Those data sets are about 30% larger, but your virtualization is a lot faster. Because we're not using a chain topology and we can scrub the data in between and the level of compressions that we're using, the backup sets are actually very, very small, and I can give you a very specific example of that. This is the metadata for this 2012 server. In production, it is using 82.9 gigabytes of data on the Windows machine. I have, on this particular system, 385 recovery points. Now, if I go to the system info here on my appliance, and I look at the data associated with my 2012 server, with the 385 independent recovery points, I'm only using 25.5 gigs of space on this particular appliance. And that's when the machine was significantly larger in size. Hopefully that answers that question.
I think so. And in that same context, Andrew, are there any best practices around minimizing the backups, or is it just a matter of the software doing its thing?
Well, it's a combo of the two. I mean, most of it falls into the software just doing its thing and then setting up your proper retention policies. I would highly recommend doing a defrag before you run this. That would hold true for any image-based backup. You want to get everything lined up and consolidated before you take your initial, and that'll get it a little bit smaller. And then if it's in your normal operations as an MSP to run defrags, don't let it go a year. Run it every Friday night. You'll have one incremental that is slightly larger than the rest throughout the week. But if you let it go 6 or 8 months and then you do a defrag, you're going to wind up with an extremely large incremental right after you do that.
Okay, excellent. And there are some questions about the field upgradable options within the appliances, specifically around the Nano. And just as a heads up, I'm not sure if the Nanos are field upgradable. I think they just come as with their storage. Yeah, that's what I thought. And on that one, the question was around 4 terabytes. So the Nano tops out at 2 terabytes, and then we would need to get into some of the other appliances, which the Rack and the Pro are both field upgradable, if I'm not mistaken. Correct, Andrew?
That's 100% correct. You can buy them we sell field upgrade kits that are 4 drives at a time, so it creates a secondary RAID 5 set when you put those in. Under the hood, we will automatically put a RAID 0 stripe over your RAID 5 sets, giving you RAID 50 for improved performance and reliability. But every time you upgrade those kits, you'll put in another RAID 5 set. If you are doing a BYOD device, you have choices of different types of RAID. We support RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5, and RAID 6. If you do field upgrade a BYOD, you wind up in a RAID 10, 50, or 60 scenario.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. And one last thing is, just in regards to the defrag you had just mentioned, how do you defrag a Windows server?
Microsoft has a built-in one. In my personal experience, I have not found it to be the most effective mechanism to defrag Windows. There are some excellent free tools out there. One that I am a fan of is called Ultra Defrag, because not only does it defrag the hard drive, it will also optimize the master file table, and an optimized master file table is key in what we do with regard to the PDV conversions that we're running on these systems. As that initial backup runs, we are literally converting that system into a virtual machine and warehousing it on the appliance, and having a good, clean master file table is really helpful for that process. So I'm a fan of that one. There are a couple other free ones out there, and then there are certainly some ones that you have to pay for.
Excellent. Thank you. And I believe that's all for now, so we can keep moving along.
All right, let's take a look at the other levels of data recovery. So the first one we looked at was the virtualization. The next is file restore. And we have several mechanisms for file restore. 2 of them are presented to you. Under the hood, we have other mechanisms as you get a little more advanced and trained. And you can optionally turn those features on and manually run different type of networking restores. But we left it with these 2 options here on purpose. It's by design, and I'll explain why in a little bit. The first is individual file restores. If a customer calls and says, I just deleted a Word document, in our world, you just select whatever point in time, you hit the mount button. It's going to go ahead and mount that point in time on the appliance, automatically redirect you to our file browser section, and you just expand out. And here's my 2012 server. There's my C drive, and let's drill down here. Let's say this file was the most important Word document in the world. You can just right-click it and download it through your browser. Because we don't have chains, it doesn't matter how old the backup is with regard to speed of recovery. Some chain-based products, the older the chain is, the longer it takes to mount these files up. So if you're doing something from an hour ago or 2 years ago, it should take you 30 seconds and no longer. If it does take longer than that, you are most likely doing something incorrect. So that's what you use for individual files or just a handful of files. If the customer has big data recovery requirements, example being, let's say they are running an SBS server and they just deleted the entire company folder, and that company folder is 500 gigs in size. In our world, you're going to want to use iSCSI. We prefer iSCSI for a couple reasons, but what you would do is you go to the particular point in time and you hit the Start iSCSI button. You're going to get prompted for test mode or live mode. This is the same question it's going to ask you when you're doing your emergency virtualization. And what we're doing here is creating another ZFS clone or snapshot under the hood of this particular point in time. If you select test mode, your user will have read-write access to that iSCSI volume, or you as the administrator will, depending on how you share it out. But as soon as you disconnect it, we will delete any changes that occur to it. So it's effectively read-only. Live mode, that clone remains permanent and persistent. So all changes made to it are there in perpetuity as an addition into your backup set. It really comes in handy if you happen to be a VMware shop. We actually are mounting under the hood of what's called a raw block device. We put some filter drivers in front of it to make it look like an NTFS volume when you're recovering back to Windows. But if you're a VMware shop, you can actually boot directly from a VMware host as a raw block device where we are acting as the data store, and you can do some pretty advanced recoveries using vMotion and vStorage back into production environments. But anyhow, you would just hit Start. The Replibit appliance now becomes an iSCSI target on the network. If on the left-hand side, if I go over to iSCSI, here's my server that I just mounted as iSCSI, the snapshot time, the volume. If I had more than one volume backed up, they would all be listed out here with particular IQ and information. On this point, you would just hop back on your SBS server, launch Microsoft's built-in iSCSI initiator, and type in the IP address of the appliance, and we will appear as a local volume back on that SBS server, and that's one of the reasons why we do this. So reason number one is on big data, iSCSI tends to be a more consistent protocol with regard to speed. If you're using server message block or Samba or traditional Windows file sharing, when you have a big data set, it starts to slow down. It starts out very, very quickly, and then when you fill the RAM on the machine you're restoring to, it grinds to a halt. iSCSI doesn't tend to do that. And number two, as I just mentioned, this is now presenting as an iSCSI local volume to the original production machine. If I go to my computer, I'm going to see this volume. As long as I drag and drop that company folder back to its original location, I'm going to get a pop-up message from Windows saying, do I want to keep my folder permissions? Hit yes. It will save you 2 weeks of brain damage with tickets coming in saying, I can't access QuickBooks, or I only have read permission to the Excel document. I used to have read-write permissions. As a practice, we generally don't write down Active Directory permissions for users on folders through our partner base. So this can save you a lot of time if you happen to do that. So let me go ahead and dismount that. Robert, any questions on that, by the way?
Not at this time.
Okay, great. Now, yesterday we talked a little bit about, we do bare metal restore to dissimilar hardware. We have a boot ISO that you can rip to a DVD or a USB stick, or if it's a VM, you can boot your VM off of it. But in a lot of cases, you don't need to do that anymore. A lot of our partners are no longer installing or are sending data back to bare metal if that machine had died and you have a replacement come in. They're throwing in a hypervisor, be it Hyper-V, VMware, or a couple other flavors out there. In our world, if instead of doing a BMR to dissimilar hardware and you're using a hypervisor, you can just hit the export button. And we are going to ask you what volumes you want to export out, and we're going to ask you, do you want a VMDK, VDI, VHD, VHDX, or RAW? You can do it across the LAN once you get a little advanced in Replibit, or you can do it directly to a USB drive, or you can actually export these out as local volumes on the Replibit appliance, and we can become an NFS share to Hyper-V or VMware on the network, and we will act as a data store. And you can get the customer up and running very, very quickly while we're acting as the disk for that production machine. And in the VMware world, you can then do your vMotion and vStorage back into your production environments and get your customer up and running. So it's a secondary methodology with regard to VMware in particular. But it saves a lot of time not having to do VMRs to dissimilar hardware. Just export it out as virtual hard drive. We'll hand it to you. It's also available under the file browser. If you hit export, under exported VMs, had I done any, I would have a VMDK or VDI sitting here, and I could just copy them across the network to whatever destination I want them to be. So any questions at all about data recovery? Otherwise, I can move on.
No, I think everyone is tracking with you quite well, Andrew. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Now, before I had mentioned, this replication button does the granular selection of which machines you want to replicate offsite and what point in times you want to send offsite and whether you want to seed it with a USB drive. But on the left-hand side here is where you actually configure your vaults. And as you can see, I have a singular vault configured. Under IP, I have the FQDN of this particular system. Everywhere in our software where it says IP address, it is interchangeable with FQDN. That holds true for our backup agent as well. Most of our partners hard code the IP address on the appliance, but if you're letting DNS run it all locally, you can do that in our backup agent as well. I'm going to go ahead and hit this pencil and edit this and show you what it looks like. So to configure an offsite vault, you just give it a friendly name, you type in its IP address or FQDN, you hit test connection. This will tell you if you have any ports blocked outbound from the appliance. Every communication we do is outbound from the end user location. That way you don't have to mess with end user firewalls, and most of them are set to allow anything out anyway. But if it is being blocked, it's going to tell you. This is a special lag in replication alert. We talked a little bit about it yesterday, where we measure recovery points between local and remote with overlapping retention policies, and this is where you can specify. And if you have a really big internet connection, you can start grouping your snapshots together, but most people leave this as a value at 1. Now, as far as the bandwidth and schedules, you can get super granular. A lot of partners will hit this add button and put 2 or 3 in here, and they will check off, Monday through Friday between, 9 a.m. and 7 p.m., let's say, only use 1 meg of bandwidth. And then during lunch hours, they'll speed it up, and after hours, they'll speed it up as well, and maybe put in a 4th one for weekends where they're going to maximize it. But I did something a little bit different on mine. Let me cancel that out and go back here and show you. I just have a single schedule that's set to run 24 hours a day using all my upload bandwidth, and it's set for every day. Now, you would think that would kill my internet connection, but what I did was I actually set QoS on my firewall or on my router, depending on, and in my case it's a firewall, but you can use either router or firewall. We use a single port 9080, to send the data over the wire. So you can create a rule in your firewall for port 9080 and set it at its lowest priority. If you do that, we will maximize and send as much data as we can whenever your internet connection is free. And when your end users start doing stuff, we will automatically slow down. So even though I have this maxed out at my 5 meg upload on my cable modem, I don't have to worry about interfering with anything because I know my firewall is going to handle it and I'm good to go, and it never really turns into a problem. And it's a little bit more efficient than setting granular schedules. We do have the ability for those granular schedules should you not have that capability in your firewall or router. But this seems to be a very, very effective mechanism. And you can push a lot of data, a surprisingly large amount of data, under this type of scenario. Now, next I'd like to show you are our alerts and jobs. Yesterday I talked about I am a huge believer in letting you know what's going on in the field across all your devices. And it was that Murphy's Law rule. If you don't know about it, you are never given a chance to fix it. And that's when your customer has an emergency something. So in here, we will alert you like crazy. Now, I have maximum alerting turned on. So my agents are heart beating my appliance every 60 seconds. It's telling me when it was created, when it was resolved, if there's any action that needs to be done with this. In this case, because it's self-resolved, I close the ticket. If you have a ConnectWise integration turned on here, when you mouse over, it'll actually tell you the ticket ID and whether it's still an active ticket or a closed ticket. We alert you for failed backup jobs, missed backup jobs. A missed backup job is differentiated from a failed because it's an absence of event alert. In other words, the appliance was smart enough to know that something should have occurred, and it didn't, and you need to know about it. And it could be due to a network outage or a hung service or whatever it may be. We're going to let you know when you're at 80% of your disk utilization. If you lost a hard drive in your system, we're going to tell you about it. I'm trying to think what else. There's literally 50 or 60 different alerts, but every major event that goes on in the field, we're going to tell you about it. Now, under jobs, This is logging everything that is going on, and there are alerts associated with this. And you can even turn on alert for a successful backup. You're going to get a whole bunch of alerts coming in, but you can do that if you want. And these are all sortable and searchable, and they also have some keyword searches in here. So I can type in, FA, and it should bring all my failed jobs to the top. And if I mouse over it, it's going to tell me exactly what happened. This was a snapshot creation failed, so that's a VSS error. Now, this would be emailed to you. This would also be put into ConnectWise for you, but it just gives you an idea of the type of alerting that we do. We break it into categories. So this was backup. This is my replication. As you can see, my replication has been pretty successful, and I actually have 2 machines being replicated in real time while we're talking. In other words, this waiting to ingestion actually means it has been sent to the remote site, but the remote site hasn't responded back. It has been ingested and is a fully recoverable recovery point on the remote vault. Seeding, this is if you're using your USB functions. Conversion, this is if I had exported anything out as a VMDK or VDI or whatever. In here, it will actually show you the volumes that are being exported and the progress that it's under. VMware and VirtualBox and VHDX, we support thin provisioning. VHDs don't support that as a protocol at all, so that's just going to tell you that it's running. The others will actually show you the percentage. And then system, if I had any updates or system level events in here, they would be listed here. So Robert, that's kind of a appliance at a very high level. Any questions regarding an appliance, or should I just move on to our management?
No, actually, we did have one comment from Lonnie around the seeding process, and he'd like to know, outside of the initial, do subsequent snapshots have to be delayed while the seeding is being shipped and processed?
No. In fact, the moment that you turn on replication and select USB seeding, we will immediately start sending the incremental data to the remote vault, and it will just sit there in a temporary holding folder until that USB drive arrives and gets ingested into the vault. The moment it gets ingested, we then start sucking in the incremental files that are sitting there on the remote side waiting for ingestion. So there's no pause or a big set of data that has to go over the wire, 7 or 10 days later, or whatever the number is.
Excellent, thank you.
All right, I'm going to hit a new tab in my browser here. At the top, I'm going to go to our management portal, and hopefully I haven't timed out. Nope, I didn't. So when you log into the management portal, once again, this is brandable to you. You can change it. And we have multiple tabs across the top. One of the most handy tabs is the boot VM report. Earlier, I showed you what it looks like on an appliance, and I told you we'll email it or we'll put it into ConnectWise. But most of our partners just come here for it. And what it does is it lists out all my appliances in the field. On this particular management portal, I have a couple different appliances talking to it. And I've had vaults configured to talk to it. They would appear here as well. I have my customers broken out on this particular appliance. The protected system NetBIOS name, the IP address of the local appliance, and then the snapshot time that was virtualized and the actual screenshot of it. And if I was doing virtualization, if I were hosting my own vault, you have the ability to do boot VM checks on your own vault. They would be listed here with the snapshot time and the screenshot of it. But you can just scroll down and you just want to look for either an NA, which means it is not configured for this particular machine, or a blue screen or a black screen, so you can get in front of that emergency curve and try and figure out on a daily basis if you're, why a machine isn't virtualizing, and you're not going to wait for the disaster event and your customer to call you to find out that it's actually not virtualizing. This is critical. It puts you on that front end where you're proactive and not reactive in the maintenance of your systems. Now, up here on the top is my Manage Systems tab. This shows me all the appliances or vaults reporting up to the system. It gives me version information, local IPs, the management port that it's communicating on. We tell you this for troubleshooting purposes. So this appliance will always dial outbound to the management portal in the sky on port 10,001. This one's 10,004, so on and so forth. It tells me what customer this machine is located at and what location, because a customer can have more than one location. And then if there's any licensing number counts associated with this, I happen to be using a storage-based license, so it's telling me how much of my storage I'm using. Now, this screen is really important because this is the screen that allows you to do remote control of all your units in the field. So if I want to remote control this particular appliance, all I have to do is hit this remote button. It's going to open a new tab in my browser. And then it's going to connect. I don't happen to have a certificate. I have a self-signed cert on this one, so that's why I gave the security warning. And I should be able to connect to that device. if you look at my URL bar, I'm actually still sitting on my management portal. I'm communicating over port 10,001 back to this unit, and I can log in and manage. If I knew my password, I could log into this device and manage it just as though I were sitting on the LAN. If you are good at Linux, you can even get to the Linux command line of the particular device and log in and manage it as well. So that's how remote management works, and it doesn't matter if it's an appliance or a vault. You have that capability on both. Now, under backup status, here is where I can see the status of all my units, and this is really handy for a knock board or if you're just coming back to your workstation in the morning. These are all sortable and searchable. You want to look for the agent status and the last backup time. You know, red is bad, green is good, and when was the last time this machine was backed up? I could even go down and drill down on the history of this machine, and I have 1,400 entries for this particular machine in perpetuity, and I can see what's going on, and is it replicating okay, so on and so forth. This machine I am not replicating because replication status is blank, and my last ingested snapshot, which is the remote location of recoverability, is not available. And I can validate that because this is my Windows 7 system, and if I go back to my appliance and I go back to protected systems, I have a gray dot. Replication is not enabled for my Windows 7 system. And if I go back to my management tab and I go to replication status, I should have a big red X there. I do, and nothing has been ingested. But these are the two tabs that you want to check every day. Just come in and sort them, bring all the reds to the top, and look at your backup times and figure out what's going on, and you'll know. Now, you'll also get your email alerts, and you'll get your tickets on ConnectWise, but this is just a real quick way to check your backup status and your replication status. Now, this is also multi-tenant. So if you want to give real-time access to your end users, if you give them credentials to the system, they would only see their computers. I don't necessarily recommend, because you may get a lot of tickets coming in for partners because they don't necessarily understand what they're, or end users because they don't necessarily understand what they're reading. But a lot of partners do like to give real-time access to their end users so that they can keep tabs on what's going on with regard to the backup status. So, Robert, any questions about a management portal?
Yes, actually, I think as it relates to the boot VM report, they've noticed that some of the snapshots were showing various stages of Windows 10 updating. Does that mean that it happens to be to the point of the update?
Yeah, so the 1 a.m. snapshot that we are booting on that particular system, the Windows production machine had received Windows updates. It had not been rebooted yet, which is a requirement to apply those updates. But because we're an image-based backup and we're capturing all the changes written in the block, those updates are being carried over into the backup set. So when we boot it up for the very first time, it's going to go through its Windows update process. Now, because it's a test mode VM, once we power it off in the automated fashion 8 or 10 minutes later, any changes, which is the application of those Windows updates, get discarded, and your backup point goes back to the original pre-update, committed pre-update state. So if you are getting those on a daily basis, that is an indicator that your Windows machine, your production machine, actually needs a reboot.
Good deal. Thank you. We also have a question around client access. And if clients are given access to the management portal, can it be set to read-only? Is it read-only? How? What exactly are the credentials set for?
No, you're granting them. Actually, no. Sorry, I misspoke. Yeah, if it's a user-level access, if I go to users here, my Andy test account is read-only. They can't make any modifications. Admin has the ability to make modifications to the management portal.
Okay, so just maybe a deeper question from my perspective is, are those the two roles that we have for end users, essentially customer and admin? Or is there anything in between?
No, those are the two roles on the appliance.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Any other questions?
If the on-premise BDR had a complete disaster and was unusable, how long would it take to boot a 2 terabyte Windows Server machine in the eFolder cloud?
It's an excellent question, and the answer is it depends. In the eFolder cloud, our cloud recovery for Replibit is similar to all the other products that they have out there. So under that scenario, you would open a ticket with eFolder as an emergency ticket. We have a 2-hour SLA under these emergency or high critical tickets, and they would spin up a continuity node for you and initiate a copy job out of the Replibit vault into the continuity node. They would actually, the continuity node is a Hyper-V machine, so they would do an export of a VHD or VHDX. Our infrastructure, it will copy at wire speed, and in that type of copy job, it's a gigabit backplane. So that 2 terabytes will copy as quickly as possible, really pushing a gigabit per second on the copy job over. So your factor of how long will it take to boot up that system is how long that copy job takes. A couple terabytes, it shouldn't be that long. I don't have the calculation off the top of my head, but it should be I would speculate within a couple hours is my guess. If you are vaulting to yourself under the MultiVault, and there is no upcharge, I just want to reiterate that for the MultiVault, you have the ability to do instant virtualization directly on the Replibit vault, so that scenario wouldn't even come into play.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yep. Anything else, or should I move on to the vault itself?
I think we're ready to move on to the vault for now. And however, if anyone has any questions about what Andy's spoken about already, please just zap them over.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to hit the tab in my browser here and move over to my vault. I know I'm on a vault because this logo says Replibit Vault. Once again, you can brand that to yourself. And I gave it a friendly name letting me know it was a vault as well. Now, this is going to look very similar to an appliance because the reality is it is 99% the same as an appliance. In fact, the ISO that we use to build appliances and vaults is the exact same ISO. And during the setup wizard, we just ask you what role you want this device to play, and we run the scripts to turn it into that particular device. But for all intents and purposes, it is pretty much the same. Couple differences, though, with regard to the role that it plays. A vault is multi-tenanted. So you will see under my protected system a username and location associated. So you may have multiple machines in the field called Server 2012 R2, or this one's a very specific domain-based name, but I could have one called Win8 UFI2 or whatever. But I now know it is located at this particular customer in this particular location. We have an engineer who's sharing this vault with me named Mark Sainer, and I happen to know that this machine's sitting at his house. So it's very specific to let you know where these are. Now, I am logged in as the admin, and when I'm logged in as the admin, I have all rights to settings and modifications to do on these vaults and upload logos and all sorts of things and modify network settings. I can view all my jobs that have occurred with regard to replication. I can go to my users tab, and I can actually see all the users authenticated to replicate back to this vault. I can actually configure quotas. I could give this guy a 500 gigabyte quota, and we will start alerting you when he's at 80% of your quota. That'll let you know you can either go back and sell him more offsite storage, or you can modify his retention policy and free up some space. And if you're not using the billing integration within ConnectWise, you can scroll down here, and let me see if I can find myself. This is my particular device. I can see I am using 59.9 gigs of data on this vault, so I could easily bill this end user for that amount of usage for offsite. In addition to that, under the multi-tenancy, when I click under the details of a protected system, I see my retention policies. I can modify it, but my recovery points are grayed out. I can't actually touch those. Each user on a vault has a unique username, which is listed here, and a unique password. In order to access the data, I actually have to log in as that particular user. Now, I haven't logged in quite some time, so actually, let me go back here. I have to double check this username, AGB eFolder. I haven't done it in a long time, and I'm hoping I can remember my password. But let me go ahead and log out and log in as this particular user. And I knew it. So now when I log in as this user, all other users disappear from view. I only see the machines associated to this particular customer. I would see all of their locations if they have multiple locations. But if I go to the details of the protected system, everything now lights up, and I have the same recovery features that I had on my appliance. Now, if you are warehousing this data in the eFolder cloud, the start VM will not function. We have to export out to the continuity node. But if you're hosting your own vault, that would function as well as the iSCSI start is not going to work for you in the eFolder cloud. But once again, if it's your own vault, that would function as well. So that's kind of a vault or the entire solution is a real high level. I know we had a very short period of time, and I was speaking as quickly as possible. Robert, do you think there are any areas that you would like any clarification on?
Not around the vaulting specifically as of yet, although, folks, if you do have any vaulting questions, please send them in. We do have one coming in from Tammy. She understands that Replibit is built on Linux, but is wondering when Replibit will support Linux operating systems.
That's an excellent question. I was just having that conversation with our product manager this morning, and he and I are having a friendly, heated argument over when we're going to roll that out. It is on our roadmap. I don't have the exact time of when it's going to come out. The reality is this. When we look across our entire customer base, an eFolder has a backup for files agent independent of Replibit for Linux and Mac. When we look across our customer base, the actual number of machines that partners are asking that, can we back up their Linux instances is a very, very small number. I personally think it's very important. Our product manager thinks there's other things that are higher priority than that just based on the volume of requests that come in. So it is there on the roadmap. I just don't have an answer for you.
So competing priorities. I'm sure our partners on the line have no understanding of what that's like. So
exactly, and we do have the backup for files for Linux, so that's why it's not quite as high of a priority.
Well, we appreciate the insight, and we'll certainly keep an eye out, from folks like me to announcing those great developments. So thank you. We don't have any other questions at this point in time. But again, everyone, if you do have anything from the Vault to the Replication to anything else that Andrew's been talking about, please shoot them on over.
You have our credit card on file, right?
So Robert, this goes back to the beginning. I'm either going to do a really good job explaining this all, or a horrible job based on the number of questions that came in.
Yep. So we'll give everyone just a moment in case they're typing away. But if that's it, so Jay is wondering where can we get the recordings from both calls. So thank you very much, Jay. I appreciate the interest. And the recording for both today's and yesterday's conversations and demonstrations will be emailed to everyone. My colleague Patrick Irwin will be taking care of that, and it should be in your inboxes. If not today, certainly no later than tomorrow. We'll also be posting these out on YouTube as well. And it seems like, Lonnie, maybe we didn't, I remember I was touching on the OEM point yesterday, but maybe we didn't quite get to the actual question and answer. But it was about whether Replibit will boot an OEM machine.
Yeah, the answer is yes. Now, depending on the manufacturer, there's a couple things you need to do, and I'll use Dell as an example. A pre-UEFI, in other words, like a 2008 server, a 2003 server, factory install, Dell creates a extra utility partition called an EFI partition. And for whatever reason, Dell puts a copy of the master boot record inside of that EFI partition, which is a FAT16 partition. And in some cases, depending on what tool they use to install it, it can be encrypted as well. So we are fully VSS aware in our backup sets. FAT16 is not a type of volume that can be backed up via VSS. So when we back up the system, we get all the volumes except for that EFI partition. So when you go to boot it, you'll be staring, and you run your boot VM report here, you'll be staring at a black screen that says waiting on disk because the boot sequence fires off, but we can't find the master boot record. So there's a very easy fix for that under that scenario. We're seeing less and less of it nowadays, where you run the BC edit command on your production machine, and you just make a backup copy of your master boot record and put it on the root of C where it actually belongs. And if that one file is sitting there, when you go to virtualize it on Replibit or your boot VM fires off, it'll boot up no problem at all. HP doesn't use that, so we don't really have problems with HP. So hopefully that answers the question in great detail.
Okay. I think so. Lonnie came back with a much appreciation on that answer, so thank you, Andrew.
Okay. Sure.
We do have one question as it relates to kind of server counts. Go through what we got here from Jade. Let me know if we maybe need anything else. But the question is, they have 5 servers in total, 4 servers at one location. The 5th server is at a second location. What would the cost be for the combined 5?
So it depends. If you're going to have, are you going to have one appliance or two appliances? You know, you can have them at both locations. Our backup agent does generate an encrypted tunnel, so we have some partners who would poke a hole in their firewall at the primary location, have the single server backup to the primary location, or if there's a VPN tunnel, they'll route it under that. Under a BYOD scenario, in other words, you're building your own appliances and just using our ISO image, that backup and you're vaulting to yourself, that backup would be $30 per server. Or you could go with a storage-based license if these are relatively small servers. And I believe the 1 terabyte, Robert, correct me if I'm wrong on this, I believe the 1 terabyte server license, which means you can back up as many machines as you want, as long as your aggregate backup data is smaller than 1 terabyte, is $99 a month. Now, if you want to send those machines to the eFolder Vault, if you're doing on an endpoint basis, in other words, you have 5 agents being billed for, those would be at $60 each, and those include 2 terabytes per agent aggregated into a single usable pool. So you'd have 10 terabytes of offsite storage. Those are $60 each per month. Or I believe if you're using the storage-based licensing, there's an ongoing monthly maintenance fee. I think in the 1 terabyte model, it's either, I think it's around $99 a month, but Robert, you might be able to correct me on that.
No, I believe you're on target with all of that, Andy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hopefully that
and just as a reminder to everyone, we got a couple of pricing questions. That was one of the more detailed ones. Just as a heads up, we'll certainly be in touch as it relates to trying to get any more information to you that you're looking for, specifically around pricing. So keep an eye out for an eFolder rep getting in touch with you. We did have James wanting us to remind everyone that they need to follow the licensing requirements from Microsoft as it relates to when those variables come into the equation.
James is 100% correct, and that is why yesterday I said you have to. That's exactly what I was addressing yesterday, and he is absolutely correct.
Wonderful. I think that's it. So with that, I think that's exhaust our questions. Just as a reminder, as we mentioned, these recordings will be sent to everyone. And also, Andrew will be at both Autotask Community Live here next month, as well as IT Nation in November. So if you want to talk a little bit more Replibit, he'll be there on site, and I'm sure he'll be happy to get underneath any additional questions you may have. So with that, I'll thank everyone for joining us today. Andrew, thank you so much for walking us through the software and all this wonderful detail. And hope everyone has a great last day of the month.
Thank you, Robert.
Hey, appreciate it, folks.